Welcome to the Run from the Norm podcast, episode 11. On this episode, I speak with my friend Austin Black, who happens to live back east in New Hampshire, but I met while running the I'm Tough 100-mile trail running extravaganza up north here in Idaho, out of McCall. If you're familiar with the area, you know how beautiful it is. We ran into each other on a big climb and descent over Jug Handle Mountain, which if you know the course, you'll know Jug Handle Mountain. It's absolutely beautiful. Austin and I have stayed in contact over the years, and we ended up having this chance to sit down and have a conversation, which you're about to hear, and I'm very excited to share with you. He just loves the outdoors, whether it's running, hiking, biking, skiing, he does it all. Please enjoy this awesome conversation with my good friend Austin Black, and sit back and enjoy. It's time to run from the norm. Austin Black, thank you for taking time to have a chat with me. We're doing this long distance, which is going to be a little unique for me, as far as a podcast is concerned. Usually I'm doing these face-to-face in some capacity, so I appreciate you being game to try out this experiment. But we met at I'm Tough, what was it, a couple years ago now?
Yeah, 2 years ago, I think now.
Yeah, and I think if I remember right, it was around mile 20, 25, I don't know, it might have been 30. And I don't remember exactly what it was, how we got talking, but we ran into each other and we ended up running the entire race together and, finishing in the handhold moment pretty much. And we shared a really cool experience and have stayed in touch. And so I really wanted to just take this opportunity to reach out and say thank you for spending that time with me. Really enjoyed it. And tell me a little bit about where you grew up and what you were like as a kid. Were you an only child? Did you have siblings?
Yeah, totally. And first off, I want to thank you for the chance to chat. I wish we could use this as an excuse to get together and do this live. But
well, we will.
But yeah,
we'll have to plan an adventure together.
100%. Yeah. But great to get to catch up. Yeah, I have a younger sister. She's actually still out in central New York, which is where I grew up, kind of halfway between Syracuse and Albany, more or less, just south of Utica, a little town called Clinton, New York, where Hamilton College is. A great place to grow up. Not super mountainous, but really pretty rolling hills, kind of out in the country there. More farms than, much else going on, but really pretty area. Very different than where I've wound up, but good place to grow up.
Nice. And did your parents grow up there too? And you said it was Utica?
Yeah, just south of Utica. Yeah, Clinton. My dad grew up in Long Island. My mom moved around quite a bit when she was growing up, but wound up not too far from there, really. And they stuck around in the area in central New York there, pretty much bullseye, dead center in New York, and spent my first 18 years there.
Oh, wow. Okay. What did your parents do again?
My dad's an engineer as well,
Okay.
and my mom's done a few different things. Most recently, she works for the Board of Realtors for the Mohawk Valley there.
Oh, wow. Okay. So what got you interested in adventure? I was asking for some little jump-off points, things that would be interesting to chat about. And one of the things you had mentioned to me is your grandfather. He started cycling back in the 60s, and he rode from his house in Albany to your parents' house. How far was that? What motivated him to do that?
Yeah, that was his annual century ride. Basically, it was almost exactly 100 miles on the dot from his house to our house, and that was definitely one of the first things that kind of opened my eyes to that level of effort. I didn't grow up surrounded really by a lot of other runners and cyclists and anybody that was really pushing the limits more than just going out and playing football and baseball and so forth. Which through high school was actually kind of focused on baseball.
Okay.
Didn't really do a whole lot of running growing up, other than just kind of running around outside and stuff. But yeah, my grandfather actually not in the 60s, but actually in his 60s.
Oh wow.
Because he basically, pretty much when he retired, he worked pretty late in life. And then after he stopped working, started to hike, did a whole lot up in the Adirondacks. And his knees pretty quickly after just a few seasons of hiking were starting to bother him. So instead of just throwing in the towel altogether, he hopped on a bike and started biking, and definitely just clicked for him. He wound up doing an unbelievable amount of biking, really right up until his pretty late years. It was tougher and tougher for him to throw a leg over the frame and get in the saddle when he was in his 90s there. But yeah, he biked right up until, I think his last year was, I think he was 94, his last year that he wound up. Yeah.
What did he do? Just ride the roads, or were there, trails? Was he popping wheelies on a mountain bike?
He was mainly a road cyclist. Pretty interesting. He would almost all local stuff, but he would scope out maps. He was I guess part of the backstory too. He was a banker, and so very, very diligent with bookkeeping and recording and records. And so
did he keep track of all his rides rides and his training and all that?
Oh, it's unbelievable. Yeah,
Really?
I have one of his bikes, and it was funny when I inherited it. I flipped on the bike computer, and it's set to the total number of miles. So like matched up with his riding log and stuff like that. And
That's crazy.
oh yeah, every single mile. Yeah, he had unbelievable record keeping. So yeah, basically, literally every single mile he had records of, and especially as he got into his older years, and it was tougher for him to go out for longer rides. So he did wind up doing those century rides. Probably his last one, he might have been around 80, but he continued to bike.
Crazy.
And what he wound up incorporating a lot of too was a lot of photography and story writing. So he would kind of weave that into his rides. And actually, Central New York is really great for that too, all the way back to Revolutionary War history. You know, there's a lot of
think about that.
Yeah, not too far off the beaten path, but a lot of pretty state routes and side roads and stuff like that have a lot of different historical markers and buildings. And so he would kind of weave that in, especially as it was tougher for him to do longer rides. He would use bicycling to
like specific destinations and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. He would research things, map it out. And it was always fun too to get his ride reports. So he had a pretty good following, mostly just family members, but he'd send out his ride reports all, written up with photographs to accompany. Yeah. Yeah. He was definitely one of the main people to get me into just general adventuring and also just kind of looking beyond kind of the standard, going out in the yard and tossing the football or playing baseball or anything like that, of some of the different types of sports and different ways to really, explore, test yourself and so forth. Yeah, absolutely. And just appreciate a lot of the other little things about some of his writings and stuff. It wasn't just all about getting out there and hammering out a ride. It was about exploring and checking out new areas. Yeah.
Sounds like he was kind of like an OG blogger.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah,
that's cool.
Yeah, definitely. If he was a little better on the computer, he would have maybe grabbed a little bit of following, but
no, that's
he would peck away. So
obviously it was a huge influence on you. And so did you get into riding? Was your dad or your mom into riding? Or did you just kind of take after it following your grandpa?
Yeah, a lot of just skipped a generation there.
Interesting.
Yeah, neither of my parents really ride at all. So I wound up, he was the influence for me to get my first road bike. And it was really his influence too, not just in biking, but in hiking too. Because like I mentioned, he used to love to hike. It was really just his knees that stopped him from doing that. But some of my early hikes, I kind of modeled some of that same kind of genre of trying to write up my trip reports after and try to document it and be able to look back on that and keep photographs and so forth. So yeah, definitely a big influence when I started to get into the outdoors a little bit more, which really was more so heavily when I got to college. We did a lot of camping growing up and stuff like that, but mostly state parks, no real big hikes or anything like that. So it was really once I got to college that I started to kind of branch out a little bit more and get really into hiking. And the hiking was the gateway to the running for me.
Did you keep track like your grandpa did when you first got into it?
Oh, yeah. When I first got into it, yeah, I wish I had stayed as diligent as he. But when I first started getting into it, I did keep some logs, and I would try to keep track of total mileage and elevation gain and stuff like that. And I would send him my trip reports too, which I know he enjoyed. I've not kept up as well, but it is tough. But at least now we do have things like Strava and stuff like that, which is certainly nowhere near the same. But at least we've got a quick, easy way to be able to go back and
take a look at what you did.
Some photos, and sometimes that's half the reason that I like to record things. Some of them are even silly, just like ride the bike down to the ice cream stand type of thing. It's I don't really care too much about racking up the miles and the stats, but it's neat to look back and be like, oh yeah, what evening did we go for a little ride down to the shop or anything like that.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way, where I just like to remember routes or get out for a certain, maybe a certain distance here or there. But I've always really been floored by the people that can keep such accurate detail of all their runs and training logs and all that. I've chatted with a couple of people that are very analytical like that, and it blows my mind.
Oh, yeah.
So I'm going to shift this a little bit. So you're riding your bike and getting outside and experiencing some of the outdoors. At what point did it shift more towards the running, and what was your first race and what made you sign up for it?
Yeah, so it was actually kind of a funny progression. Yeah, my freshman year of college, I went to a little engineering school in upstate New York, Clarkson University. Started doing a bunch of hiking up there. And then my sophomore year, I wound up getting a co-op, which basically a semester-long internship at an engineering place up in northern Vermont, just outside of Burlington area. And, so I moved up there in January or whatever, middle of winter, and, didn't really know anybody else there. There was a gym at work. So I figured, well, after work, maybe I'll just start hitting the gym. And I just started doing kind of silly things, just like I'd throw out a weight vest and crank up the incline. Then I kind of started to play around with like, okay, can I do a mile a little bit faster? And this was all pretty much just on the treadmill. So I'd just hop on and kind of mess around and play with it. Yeah, totally. Yeah, no idea what I was doing. Sometimes I'd bring in my backpack that I brought my gym clothes in and throw a bunch of free weights in that and hit the incline. So
the more you sweat, the better the workout.
Pretty much, yeah. And it was largely centered around just like, how can I get better at hiking? How can I like go further, go faster and stuff like that? So running really wasn't even necessarily at that point at the forefront of my mind. It was really more so, how can I do some of these hikes? There were some of these figures like, one of the historic ones, at least out in the Northeast, the Adirondacks, is Bob Marshall. He's got this legendary hike where he does this big, long kind of, especially, for his day in the 30s, just, unbelievable effort pushing the envelope, and really just he makes it sound casual too when you read his trip report about what he does, where he stops into Johns Brook Lodge midway through his route for a bite to eat and stuff like that. But so it was really centered around getting a little bit better at hiking. And then funny enough, I was living in Colchester, Vermont, and I happened to see there was this half marathon that was on a bike path right there. So pretty flat. And the furthest to date that I had run was probably about 6 miles or so. But I had hiked maybe 14 or 15, somewhere in through there. So I knew I was capable of going that far, but I had never actually set out and run in a single shot 13 miles. So I figured, what the heck, this is right next to where I'm living at the time. I'll go give it a shot and see how it goes. So I ran that, finished just over 2 hours. I think it was 2:10 or so.
Other than the distance, did you plan out like nutrition and hydration strategies from hiking, or did you just toss a water bottle in your pocket?
Oh man, I had no idea what I was doing. It was
ignorance is bliss sometimes. Just go and do it.
Yeah.
Focus on the finish line and that's it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I remember still because it was a point to point actually. So it started right around the corner from where I was living, but I had to drive down to Burlington to catch the bus back to the starting line. And I remember looking around the bus and looking at these people thinking like, oh man, what are they doing? Trying to, scope out and figure out what I'm supposed to be doing. I had no idea.
Imposter syndrome.
I think I basically was wearing like hiking clothes. So I'm looking around feeling like a total goof with, long shorts. All these other guys are doing their stretches and stuff. I'm just ready to go out for a run. But that was funny because, I crossed the finish line, and that was the first time that I really ever thought like, hey, wow, a marathon is something that is actually doable by, normal humans. Up to that point, I had just always thought marathon is just a total crazy distance. It's only for super, super serious runners, and it would take a massive effort to be able to get there. Yeah. Just seems fairly unattainable without a real dedicated push for it. And that was the first time that I thought, you know what, that's actually something that, maybe someday I could do. And at the time when I was living in Vermont there, they had KeyBank Vermont City Marathon right in Burlington there as well. Was basically a month later, but race registration was like $100, and I was still a college student, even though I did have a job, but $100 seemed pretty steep. And I thought, well, maybe another time. Funny enough, and I would never condone this now, but I just happened to be on Craigslist of all things and saw somebody was selling their bib. They had injured their ankle or whatever. And this was not too far after I had run this half marathon, which up to that point, I had only ever really run about maybe 6 or 7 miles. So finished the half marathon, and in my late evening figured, all right, what the heck, I'll go buy this guy's bib from him. It was the night before the race at this point. So drove down, met him in Burlington at some pub. Not that I would condone swapping bibs and ghost running and stuff now.
You know what? I'm gonna come to your defense on that one, because we have a huge race here. It's a half marathon, and it is cutthroat trying to get in. It sells out within, I don't know, something ridiculous, 5 minutes of when it opens. And you'll see people on Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist and whatever. As long as somebody's getting out there and running, I don't know, it might be wrong, but I'm going to come to your defense on that one. You saw the race. There was an opportunity. Unfortunately, sometimes people can't make it. It's better to not see the bib go to waste. And you said that was a month after the half marathon?
Yeah, almost exactly. So yeah, I mean, there was training plan, nothing. Yeah, I mean, nothing, absolutely nothing, just barely an inkling. And I just happened to see, oddly enough, I don't even remember how I had stumbled upon it on Craigslist, but just happened to see that ad on there, and just for whatever reason, at that
got the itch
that
like,
evening, just yeah, and I kind of figured I had literally told no one that I was even thinking of doing this, so there's zero pressure. So I figured, even if I go out there and the best I can do is what I've already done, a half marathon. Any step past that is going to be my longest run ever. So
yeah, that's
I'll
a good,
just
good
go
way
out
to look
and,
at it.
Yeah, total no pressure situation, and figured, well, what the heck, I'll give it a shot, and no matter what, I'll learn something along the way there.
That's really cool that you had that perspective, because I think a lot of people, when they first get into that stuff, you get really focused on, I got to perform, I got to do this time. There's just some arbitrary goal, and it's hard to just let all that go to the wayside and look at it from the perspective of, I'm just going to go out and have an adventure. I'm going to have fun. It is what it is. The bucket list, I guess, is just getting to the end of it. So I would assume, I don't know if you enjoyed it, but it wasn't as bad as you thought, or did the wheels totally fall off?
Oh, the wheels definitely fell off, but I managed to patch them back on, whatever I could figure out. Yeah, I hit that halfway point, and I mean, yeah, heat training, that phrase, was not in my vocabulary at all or anything. And this was pretty early season and wound up being a real hot, humid day. And I hit right around that 13-mile mark. There's this climb up Battery Street, kind of right on the Lake Champlain border there. And I remember roasting, just walking up that. And again, too, like I had no idea about any sort of running culture. So I'm thinking at this point, I'm not running, I'm walking up the hill, and I'm thinking like, all right, well, I've kind of failed because I haven't run every step. I had never heard of things like gala walking or anything like that. But I figured, well, what the heck, I'll just keep walking it out until I can start to jog again. And eventually wound up getting into the shade, was able to do a little bit more jogging, and managed to pull off a finish. And I think it was 4:35. So, not setting any records, but you wound up finishing it as as Andrew Butterfield. So we share the initials there.
Thanks, Andrew.
Yeah, still remember that. I guess that's kind of telling too, that I still remember some of those details and stuff like that. But yeah, a very memorable experience, and really, again, totally shifted my perspective on running and the types of things that you're capable of if you really just start to think about, what can I do? What can I try? And am I going to hit a point where I just say, like, I literally can't take another step? And that's kind of what got me through when I hit that wall just around the halfway mark. I thought, well, I'm still moving. I can still take another step. And, if I decide that I'm totally toast, then my car is right over there. I'll just catch a ride over to it, and nobody will know any different, basically.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was,
really
and I think
tell anybody about this either, right?
Right. Yeah. Nobody. Yeah. No friends, no family members, anything like that. Nobody knew I was going out there and giving it a shot. So it was no pressure at all. That was, I think that was, let's see, 2010 would have been the year that I ran that. So that was definitely a big shift for me, being able to go out there and just kind of see what can I do, and oh wow, I can actually do one of these things here.
And you said you were still in college at the time, right?
Yeah, I was still just definitely did not consider myself at all a runner. Really just looking to get better at hiking and stuff like that. So it really wasn't for, I don't know, probably a couple of years before I thought, all right, this running thing's kind of taken over from from the hiking thing. But
so what happened then? So you finished the marathon, and did you continue to build your running then as you're going through school, or how did you transition it into something that you're doing more often and you're looking at it? I mean, you've been on some pretty epic adventures. Yeah.
I think, that really was the start, I would say, of, getting a little bit more diligent about considering, hey, this is training, let me go out, let me run more regularly, let me do, build up. So I started to research and, buy some books and start to get an idea. Like I said, I had never had a coach, I'd never really run. So I didn't really know what I was doing per se, other than get out there and lace up shoes and go for a run. And so really my running still for quite a while was still mostly road. It really wasn't until it's about a year and a half later, I had finished, I think, 2 more road marathons. And at this point I was living in Ithaca, New York, which great town for trail running and stuff like that. Again, another co-op that I was doing for a semester, living down there for about 8 or 9 months. And I'd never heard the term ultramarathon before, really, but I had finished a few marathons, and I happened to stumble upon, when I was searching around, this 50K that was not too far from their Virgil Crest ultramarathons. And it really, really cool race that they have multiple distances, and 50K was actually the shortest of the distances. So I figured, well, I kind of approached it with that same same sort of mentality as the first marathon there. I figured, well, I've run a few marathons. I could give this thing a shot, try out this ultra marathon. And, it's only a few more miles, and it looks like it's on some cool trails, and it looked like there's some cool aid stations along the way and stuff like that. But still totally didn't really have any great idea of exactly what I was getting myself into, or any sort of how to really run a trail race. What is it like? I really jumped into it from a road running mindset more so. I remember hiking up some of the crazy inclines, and again too thinking like, I'm supposed to be running this whole thing. I shouldn't be hiking or anything like that. So totally different. It's kind of silly perspective looking back on it now too.
I can't tell people I'm running if I'm power hiking the uphill.
yeah, exactly. So that's it was kind of silly, and it was funny too. I went into it. I think there was a 13-hour cutoff for that somewhere in through there. Pretty lengthy, because they still had people on course for some of the longer races. So it's very generous cutoff.
That's cool.
I remember entering that and thinking like, man, I don't know if I'm even going to finish in that time frame, and wound up actually doing really well in that race. Let me ask
you real quick. Sorry to cut you off there, but I want to ask you. I guess I've got a couple questions here. One is, what books are you reading to learn more? Because you said you didn't have any coaching or anything. So what books are you reading to learn more about running and how to train, I guess, if that's what you were calling what you were doing, or if you were just going out and running? And the second question is, were you also still getting out and extending your hikes, or are you just primarily focused on just running right now?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, a lot of the resources, just, a lot of different online things, between mostly the kind of the mainstream stuff, I guess I would say, like Runner's World and stuff like that. Like I said, I still didn't have a ton of exposure into trail running. And of course, even just 10 years ago, it seems silly because it's really not that long ago, but there wasn't anywhere near as much resources. You could go learn about these different races and stuff like that. And
you had to search a little bit harder to find it.
Yeah. And, did pick up a couple different books from like the Mountaineers Conditioning for Outdoor Fitness. So it was still definitely getting out there and hiking quite a bit, but the hiking was really kind of the weekend thing when I could get away. And fortunately, Clarkson University was only about an hour and a half from the high peaks of the Adirondacks in New York, so I could get down there and get into the mountains pretty easily. I had a great core group of friends. They have a fantastic outing club up there at Clarkson, and so we'd still get out and do hikes. And actually, that's really when I started to get into rock climbing and some other adventures and stuff, but would get out as often as I could during weekdays to be able to just get out for a run kind of around campus on some of the country roads that are nearby there, and started to really notice the shift too of like how much better I felt if I was able to get out for a run versus days where I would, if I missed running for 4 or 5 days. That's really kind of where it took off for me, and kind of continued from there pretty much.
And how old were you at this point?
I was probably about 20 at that point.
And so you're kind of getting into a little bit of a better mental space. The more consistent you're doing it. And now you've done the half marathon, you succeeded. You've done a marathon, you've succeeded. Now you've gone to the 50K. At what point do you start looking for the longer distances, but also the bigger adventures? Because you were telling me, I think last week, what was the hill climb you were doing? It was like the most vert you can get in 24 hours. Where did things shift? Where did things shift from just getting through a 50K to where you're chasing these epic adventures and really pushing yourself to see, I guess, what you're capable of?
Yeah, I think I continued on I got more into trail running, but really just didn't really break past that 50K envelope for quite a while. It was probably 4 or 5 years before I ran. Actually, it was just a 40 miler. Basically, there was a little local one actually in the greater Boston area. Middlesex Fells is a great little park there with some scrappy hills and trails. That is a great local running club, the Trail Animals Running Club, that puts on some no frills, low key races there. So I did a 40 miler, and then actually signed up for 50 miler not too long after that, as well as a 100K. And the 100K was actually sort of on a whim. I had been looking at the 50 miler as my next big step, and then just happened to see that there was still some space in this other 100K, and hopped in on that. I think probably only a week or two before the race, jumped in there and figured, well, I'll give this a shot on kind of stepping up the next distance there. And that went pretty well overall, but I remember hitting probably about mile 35 or 40 in through there, and had torn up my quad pretty good, but just figured, well, can I put one foot in front of the other? Am I doing any permanent damage? Yes and no, respectively. And
start taking stock of your body, and if you can keep yourself rolling.
Yeah, exactly. And so wound up at least finishing that and did halfway decent there.
Nice.
And it really wasn't for quite a while. I had always kind of figured, this 100-mile thing's totally insane. And actually, the first exposure that I even had was at that first ultramarathon Virgil Crest that I ran. They had a 100-mile distance. And again, too, like, had never heard of ultramarathon and had definitely never heard of anybody running and racing 100 miles. That seemed, even just a few years ago, marathon seemed totally asinine. So 100 miles seemed just like
ridiculous.
Totally ridiculous. Yeah, absolutely. So it was quite a while before I actually started to entertain the idea of maybe stepping up, given that I had done by that point, 100K, a couple different 50 milers and so forth.
So are you focusing more on the races now and just building your distance on the races, or are you using that to get yourself out to the bigger and bigger adventures? And I know I kind of keep pushing, I guess, a little bit that way or hinting towards the adventure side too, but it's interesting as you're looking for these farther distances and challenging yourself more. I'm wondering when it became a mental shift where now you want to go and I want to see what I'm capable of. It's just you're looking for the great adventure and this one looks like it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, I think I factor in both challenge and aesthetics too, I guess. I've never had a huge draw to just go try to do any crazy hamster wheel things just to try to see, can I run 200 miles or anything like that. I think it's pretty awesome that the folks that are able to go out and crank Cocodona, Bigfoot, some of these races that they're putting on now, just unbelievable. That doesn't have a huge draw to me. But yeah, along the lines of the adventure piece too is really, I hadn't mentioned, but really, running is, I would say, definitely my main hobby, but I definitely suffer from a little bit of jack of all, master of none type deal where biking is definitely still a big part of my hobbies. And yeah, I would say I have way more hobbies than I need at this point, and kind of all centered around being outside. Big days in the mountains is really kind of my main thing, whether that's running or other modes. Yeah, I also do a lot of Nordic skiing, backcountry skiing, alpine skiing, rock climbing, ice climbing, do a fair amount of, some paddling here and there, road biking, mountain biking, some great gravel cycling up here as well. So it's great to be able to kind of link up some different dirt roads, light trails with some roads and stuff like that. So there's a ton of great options out there. So yeah, I kind of run in the gamut of a lot of different outdoor hobbies, which in some respects is great cross training. And I think has helped me a lot of times to be fairly injury free.
I was going to ask you about
basically,
that.
Basically, since I started running, I think that's really what has helped me the most. Is really just I wind up kind of naturally having this diversity of cross training, and I'm sure a lot of times it winds up being semi detrimental to overall running performance. But yeah, I love getting out there, getting on the bike, whether it's, road bike or mountain bike. I love getting out and being able to paddle, or got out for some great ski tours despite our pretty mediocre winter that we had in the Northeast and in New Hampshire here. But I really love getting out and being able to explore on a lot of different modes of transportation and moving your body through the mountains.
Like you say, I think the idea of cross training is good. As I get older, I'm realizing that if all I do is run, I'm not moving my body as much as I should be, to where you start getting ailments, things hurt, you wake up and you're in pain. So you said you've been injury free. Have you had any bad injuries, or have you really just kind of avoided it by keeping yourself occupied with all these different things that you're doing? Yeah,
I've been really fortunate to have, by and large, avoided anything major. I've probably lost about 24 toenails total in the past 5 or 6 years here, but otherwise, yeah, I mean, really just actually that semi blowing up my quad at that first 100K, I think was probably about the worst. And that, fortunately, I was able to do a little bit of PT and get that worked out relatively quickly. Didn't wind up being anything that was really nagging and ongoing or anything like that. So yeah, fortunately, no real chronic things. So and I think, yeah, at least for me, maybe it's mostly luck, but I think at least in part, it hopefully has a little bit to do with mixing it up and getting out and doing a lot of different things, especially in the winter. I still run all year round, but I'll wind up going out and getting out skate skiing, getting out,
nice.
Doing some alpine touring. So it's just a lot of different muscle groups. So yeah, I figured when you wind up spreading the load out, it winds up being a little bit easier to be able to maintain, getting out there every day. So it winds up being relatively few and far between that I wind up taking like a real full-on rest day. But I wouldn't say that I'm necessarily missing out entirely on rest, because some of those days might just be like a relatively easy cycle, or get out for like a few mile cross-country ski, stuff like that. So it's being able to kind of mix it up and keep it interesting too. Yeah, I think really what helps keep me injury free and excited to get out and get up sometimes super early in the morning to get out and get after it.
So let me ask you, do you feel like it's necessary for you to calm your head down? Like, are you struggling to sit still and you got to go feed that side of you to get out for the day? Or are you pretty chill when you're not running? You just really want to get out and experience the adventure?
Yeah, I would say, and I think probably other folks would say I don't sit still particularly well. Fortunately, I'm typically able to sit down and concentrate and really dive in. And I attribute that to a lot of just having to crank through a fairly rigorous college schedule there for the entire time that I had there. So there really wasn't any room for, major distractions, but definitely being able to get out and get a run in for not just physical, but mental health is definitely helped out big time for me to be able to get out and get that movement in. It just winds up kind of setting the day up, or, if it's an afternoon, kind of closing out the day really well to be able to keep positive and just be able to relax a little bit more.
Yeah, I hear you. Do you prefer to run in the morning or the afternoon?
That it was kind of funny. I was always an afternoon, evening runner, really mostly driven by my prior work schedule. Yeah, I changed jobs a little over a year ago, and now the job schedule really lines up a little bit better to be able to get out and get my workout in the morning. So and that's actually been great. I kind of wondered how it would go at first, because there's definitely been some mornings that I remember getting up for work and thinking like, oh man, it's 15 degrees out and blowing and snowy and stuff. I'm glad I'm going to work and not for a run, but I am generally a morning person too anyways. That helps. But there really hasn't been a single morning where I thought, I'm just going to hit the snooze button and just, get started with work in an hour and a half or anything like that. But yeah, I guess part of it too is really just there's so many different things that I wind up enjoying. So if I wind up feeling like I'm tired of running the same route back and forth, then I'll think, all right, well, let me get my skis in the truck for the next day. Unfortunately, there's a couple good mountains nearby. I can do like a morning lap before work. So if I get out there early enough.
I'm the same way. Majority of the time ran afternoons or evenings. I love seeing the sun go down, but then because of work, I started to shift. And I'm like you. I like getting up early, and I never feel bad when I get out and get my running because I feel like I've accomplished something. But you said it shifted a little bit when you were with this work change. Now, you're an engineer. What type of an engineer are you?
Radar systems engineer. So spent a while with a different company, kind of bounced around a little bit, but fortunately got to do a whole bunch of travel, and then more recently joined a great little startup. It's actually based out of California. So in part, winds up working out well to get my morning workout in, because some of the teams out on the West Coast there. So it's an awesome way to start the day to be able to get that workout in. And then you don't have to worry about trying to squeeze it in, especially if you wind up with things piling up towards the end of the afternoon and evening.
Yeah, I hear you. How much travel do you do?
Doing a fair amount. I'm probably on average 2 or 3 times a month in through there. It kind of ebbs and flows a little bit. We'll probably have a fair amount coming up here in the next year or so. But I really enjoy the variety of being able to get out and travel, especially to really sync it up with running too. It's such a great way to be able to get out and see new places and so forth, especially when you're able to, I've been really enjoying getting out early in the morning and checking out different locations kind of before everybody's up and about and stuff like that, and getting quiet. To get to see the sunrise in new locations and stuff like that is really enjoyable.
Do you have any one specific area or one specific adventure when you think of your favorite things that you've done? It always kind of comes to mind, maybe a certain adventure or a certain area that you like to go to?
It would be tough to pick any one, but I had a couple different ones out in California, especially with, going along the running theme and along, being able to look into different distances and so forth. One great adventure, I went out for my best friend from college, Will. Met up with him out there. He was living in Ventura at the time, and he was working in Patagonia actually, and went out for a run in Kings Canyon, Sequoia National Forest there, Ray Lakes Loop, just this really phenomenal, beautiful, go up to 13,000 feet or so, these beautiful alpine lakes. And that was a very memorable one for a few reasons. One being that was one that I learned some very good hard lessons on. It's about a 40-mile loop, and we were just out there kind of on our own, a group of, I think we had 6 altogether, and I had just been getting a little bit behind on my nutrition and probably on water a little bit too. Didn't bring anything for electrolytes or anything like that, and went to dip in a creek at probably right around the 50K mark or so. So still a little ways to go. And I remember getting out and just feeling totally nauseous and just throwing up like 3 liters of water.
Oh my gosh.
And thinking, well, all right, now what? So it was definitely a learning experience. And that's a great thing too about, when you do all your training in the mountains and then you go do some of these races, and it's like, hey, even when an aid station is spaced a little further, like 12 miles apart, it just feels like a total bonus compared to running and training in the mountains where you've just got to be totally 100% self-sufficient. So
Yeah.
that was a really phenomenal run, and learned the hard way electrolytes are important, and wound up being able to finish that run off. And that was also definitely an eye-opener of, hey, I can go do more of this type of thing on my own too, because I had started to run some longer distances, but really just in races. So that was really one where I thought, you know what? I could get out there and get some long 20, 30 plus mile runs out in the mountains and be able to be self-sufficient and, bring a water filter, bring food and everything. And that's really, like I said, it's one of my favorite things is just big days in the mountains, whether it is, running's definitely the top one for me, but, running, climbing, skiing, it's really what I enjoy.
I hear you. We just got back from a week in Montana and it absolutely blew my mind. We were in Bozeman and I was running up in the mountains up there, and it was kind of a religious experience. It kind of put you in your place almost. The world is so huge and so vast, and there's so many amazing things to see. And when you're up there doing this thing, you're totally in the moment, but at the same time, you're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. What else is there out there? What else can I do?
Yeah.
So, which kind of will lead into something you had mentioned, and I'd like to learn a little bit more about. You mentioned Arctic and Antarctic exploration. What did you do in the Arctic and Antarctic? What were you doing there?
Unfortunately, I haven't had a chance to get Antarctic yet, but I spent some time at a work site up in Arctic Norway, and that kind of spurred my interest a little bit into some of these different Arctic tales and learning more about some of the original, and actually it was great to hear on one of your earlier episodes mention of Shackleton and Endurance.
Yes.
Totally one of my favorite books for sure. Highly recommended, of course. And there's so many.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's phenomenal. But and it's funny too, because it winds up playing into when I think about out there having a tough time, whether it's running or really even just like day-to-day type thing, really just maintaining that perspective of, you think about some of these guys and gals that were doing these totally unbelievable explorations, and really just Arctic, Antarctic is really just one venue. There's many, but that's one that I had started to read more about and learn more about. And when you hear about some of these things that people were able to endure and get through and problem solve and work out, it's like it really just makes you think too, like that whatever you're working through, whether it's physical and whether it's at home or on the trail or anything like that, it's like, wow, this is nothing compared to like being buried in the snow with 8-foot snowbank above me and winds whipping at 100 miles an hour.
Exactly.
Yeah, and all of my partners are miles and miles away, and only a couple sled dogs left or whatever it may be. It's it's pretty unbelievable. Yeah, one other book that definitely highly recommend too is War Against the Arctic. These guys in the 1700s, basically, long story short, they go out for whaling, these Russian sailors, and ship gets trapped in some ice. A few guys go ashore because they think that they know of a cabin. So they bring a couple days worth of supplies, go check it out. They find the cabin. They go back to tell all the other guys on the ship that, hey, we found this cabin. Come on ashore. They go back, they look out the next day, ship's gone, totally gone, got crushed by the ice and sank. So these 4 guys up in kind of the Svalbard region north of Norway, and they basically kind of, I don't want to spoil it, but they wind up spending about 7 years up there. All together. It's just, just so totally unbelievable. Like, you think about how that really puts things in perspective.
Oh, absolutely.
At least I'm not having to go out in 24 hours of daylight during the summer, not seeing the light for 3 months of the year, getting chased by polar bears and trying to hunt reindeer and do whatever you can to just
survive.
Continue to. Oh yeah, absolutely unbelievable.
Well, I wrote that down because I'm a huge bookworm, so I'm gonna read that one next. War Against the Arctic.
Yeah, David Roberts, great author. He's got some other great ones too out there, but that one highly recommended.
Nice. So what does a radar engineer do? That sounds crazy high tech to me.
Yeah, there's a fair amount of different applications. I guess one of the ones actually that not something that I've ever really worked on, but one that's becoming a little bit more familiar to most folks is, you've got things like blind spot monitoring and collision avoidance and stuff like that. So many of those systems are radar based there.
Okay.
There's quite a few other applications out there. A lot of people are used to seeing the big red spinning dishes anytime they're at the airport. So of course that's air surveillance radar and looking out over the nearby, the runway for air traffic. And then of course, a lot of defense applications as well.
Interesting. What led you down that path? I think you said your dad was an engineer as well, yeah?
Yeah, he's a manufacturing engineer and kind of latched onto that a little bit pretty much right out of college. And one of the things that I've really enjoyed about that is there's really, and this is something that I've kind of looked to pursue in a lot of different areas, not just in work, but there's just such a breadth of different avenues you can go down with something like radar. You can be kind of in the weeds on the hardware, the RF chain side of things. You can be in software and algorithms, or even you can just be power and cooling and just overall physical architecture. So there's just such an amazing variety of different avenues that you can go down, different things to learn. So you can really spend your whole career just working on more or less one product, but constantly learning and being able to just continue to absorb new things, especially as new technologies emerge and so forth. There's kind of an endless amount of things that you can kind of wind up growing into and learning more about, and really keeps things interesting.
And then you go from one position or company to another, and it just builds on it to where you just have this unique skill set and perspective. I try to understand high-tech stuff, and I think I struggle most of the time. But let me ask you then, with all these things, your love of adventure, you're getting out and doing the big runs, kind of an analytical, technical focus with your professional career. What's like the one thing outside of all that stuff that you absolutely love to do, and you could lose time doing it day in and day out, that maybe people don't know about? Do you write too? Do you love music? Do you love to quilt? What's your secret talent?
No quilting typically, but not a lot of writing anymore recently, but a lot of reading and definitely a ton of music. And that's one thing that I know you and I shared some trail time chit-chatting about, and really love hearing your stories of your past music experiences. But yeah, music is definitely a big one for me. I've got music going almost all the time, pretty much anytime I can. I've got either something streaming or even I'll bust out the vinyl collection and get the record spinning sometimes too. So a little bit of everything.
This is going to be hard to pinpoint, but do you have a favorite genre, and who's your favorite artist?
Yeah, I think I would have to probably overall, if I had to pick a favorite, I'd probably say Grateful Dead.
Nice.
Yeah, but I've got a pretty eclectic, as I know you do too, taste in music. And I can go between rock, blues, jazz, and obviously rock encompasses so many different genres in and of itself there. But yeah, there's a ton of different stuff that I really enjoy listening to. It really depends on the day and the mood.
Yeah, that makes total sense. So that'll probably answer the next question I was going to ask you. When you run, do you listen to music, or do you just listen to my favorite word, Scythurism, the sound of the wind through the trees?
Oh, yeah. I wrote that one down after I heard you mention that the other week. I love that. But actually, along those lines, that's the music to my ears really there, is whether it's on the road or the trail, really. I don't ever run with headphones. I really just enjoy being out there and listening and trying to take it in. And a lot of times, too, that's actually what'll kind of help sort of recenter me if I'm having a tough time, whether it's out on a long training run or out in a race or anything like that. I'll just try to take a step back really and tune in and just kind of listen, whether it's the crunch of trail under your shoes or, maybe there's some birds going or whatever it may be. Just totally try to be immersed in the experience. And, that definitely has forged some memories too of, sometimes you're out there and it feels like you're having an awful time, but then you look back on it and you remember a lot of those things. And sound is definitely one of the things that I do also appreciate and enjoy about being out there. So unless I'm hopping on the treadmill, which is very rare, I usually skip the headphones. Yeah, as much as I love music too, but that's one time that I don't have the tunes going.
You're just listening to nature and getting in tune with your body. I got a question about I'm Tough. So I don't remember what mile we were at, but we were running along and I hit a bad wall and I was really struggling. And you gave me something, and I don't even know what it was. Was it electrolyte? What did you give me? Because something just completely turned me around because I had hit the wall and I was just ready to be done slogging along. And you gave me the magic bullet. What was the magic bullet? I've always wondered about it.
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. I think it could have either been, I usually try to carry like some ginger chews, or I'll bring like those salt caps with a little bit of caffeine in them. Those are a lot of times what flips the switch back on for me if I'm having a rough point there. But that was a great experience that we got to share there. And there were innumerable times that you were helping push me along here too, especially that last big climb.
Oh, geez.
Before. yeah, that was rough. But yeah, especially, looking back on a lot of those, just a great experience to get to share too.
How often do you travel out to races like that? Was I'm Tough something specific that you traveled for that race, or was there another thing that brought you to the area?
I've been trying to do basically one a year, a race that I try to turn into a little bit of an adventure to try to see a new area, check out something different, see some new trails, meet some new people, get some new perspectives. And that was one that I had kind of had on my radar for a while and was pretty interested in going out and checking out. I had just seen and heard such beautiful things, and we'll focus a lot on what are the aesthetics of the course and looking for something that's really going to keep me excited about keeping going, finding places that are just absolutely gorgeous, not tough for the sake of being tough, although Jeremy was a little bit mean on some of the some of the last few miles there.
Yeah, I was going to say the ending that never ends.
Yeah. That was one that I had just heard such great things about and really lived up to both its acronym and also just the beauty that I had heard about too.
Yeah, and what Jeremy and Brandy put into putting a race together and creating a extremely difficult and challenging course, because it's not just that physical challenge. It definitely tests you mentally, which in hindsight, I really love that about what they do. I know I was cursing at the time, like, oh my God, this is crazy. We're going back uphill again. But I'm actually going to be going back in a couple of weeks and doing the McClassic, which it'll be a 50K, but it's on the old I'm Tough course. And every time I say I'm never going to go race that races again, I always end up doing it. But you've heard of a masogi? Have you heard of a masogi?
No.
It's a Japanese word for, and I'll probably butcher the meaning of it, but it's like once a year you go on this spiritual kind of adventure, and it's this time to go and test yourself mentally, physically. But I like to go out and do a masogi. Once a year, do one big challenge just to go out and really test yourself.
Nice. Yeah. And I do love following along with the past couple that you've wound up going out for, including just seeing how you mixed it up with some local things to be able to just do something totally different and new. I've got High Lonesome 100 out in Colorado next month. So that's coming up in actually just under a few weeks here. So that'll be the big one for the year for me.
Do you know the gain loss? I can imagine it's huge.
Yeah, I think it's right around 23. It's more or less a big loop with a couple little out and backs mixed in there.
Nice.
Yeah, it's also high altitude mixed in there. The average is right around 10.5.
Oh, wow.
So yeah, we'll be spending some time up high.
That's awesome. I'll have to watch for your pictures. And if you do a race report, I'm definitely going to have to read that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time to chat with me. Is there anything else that you would like to touch on or mention that I might have missed or didn't give you a chance to talk about?
We covered a pretty good slew. I think, one thing that I guess I'll just bring up kind of in closing here somewhat fittingly too, I think was actually one of the things that you and I wound up connecting on early on. I want to say it was like maybe the jug handle descent the first time we were chatting was actually gratitude. And, that's really one thing that I've been able to find a lot of energy from, being able to go out there and do some of these longer efforts. And so, yeah, definitely closing on that, like thankful to get the chance to not only spend some quality time together out on the course there, but, grateful to be able to keep in touch and get a chance to reconnect. That's definitely another thing that I've really appreciated about going out and traveling for some of these races, is just the different people that I've met and had the opportunity to get to know both on the trail and off, and be able to stay in touch with too.
Absolutely. It creates friendships that you wouldn't normally have unless you kind of put yourself out there in these opportunities. And I appreciate the fact that we ran into each other, because obviously we've kept in touch too and been able to share stories, and this reconnection is absolutely awesome, and I can't wait to hopefully run something together. I'll have to come out your way, though, because I haven't really spent much time in the mountains up there, so I'll have to take a trip, and you'll have to show me around a little bit.
Oh, please do, yeah. Doors always open for you guys out here, and happy to show you some of what the White Mountains have to offer here.
Oh, that would be awesome. Well, I appreciate it, and Austin, I do like to close out on one final question, which I think the gratitude thing is a huge component into this segue. But with that in mind, what does overall legacy mean to you? And when you get to this point, you're looking back at your life and all the things that you've done. I'm kind of thinking of your grandfather at this point. I'm sure he probably has no idea the impact that he had on you, or maybe he does, and your desire to get out and see the world from this bigger lens. But what does legacy mean to you, and what's the legacy that you hope to leave?
Yeah, I think overall, really just I try to ask myself this from time to time is, what have I done today or this week, whether it's for myself or for others. So just being able to have an answer to that question. Sometimes it's something small or silly, but it's easy to wind up having, kind of that ripple effect too. So just trying to be able to keep positive, both personally and being able to offer up my perspective to other folks, and including being able to just say like, hey, look, I thought a marathon was some impossible thing at one point too. Just consider trying to do something that you might think is too challenging, but just riding that cusp of what's the next thing I think I might be able to do, and go out there and give it a shot.
That's awesome, because you never know what you can accomplish until you get out and actually give it the opportunity. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Austin, thank you again. I really appreciate you taking this time, and I can't wait for us to catch up again here soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Jake. And looking forward to hopefully reconnecting on and off the trail in person here. We'll have to make it happen.
Absolutely. Thank you, Austin. Take care.
Yeah, sounds great.
And that's a wrap for episode 11 of the Run from the Norm podcast. I hope you enjoyed getting to know a little more about my friend Austin Black, and I hope you found some motivation and inspiration to get yourself outside and chase your own sense of adventure. I want to say a sincere thank you to each and every one of you for sharing your time and listening to this episode. And if you're enjoying what we're doing, or even if you have a suggestion on what we can do to make this better, hop on over to www.runfromthenorm.com, go to the contact page, and let me know. I'm always trying to get better at what we're doing here, and your feedback is a key component of that effort. Please also follow the Run from the Norm Facebook page, where we can give you updates on new podcast releases, because we're always bringing you cool, new, and exciting conversations from all different sorts of people who are just out there getting it done however they see fit. With that, thanks again for listening, and I hope you stay motivated, stay inspired, and just keep moving forward. Most importantly, get outside and run from the norm.
Check that mic, make sure it sound right, boy.